This podcast is powered by The Plug.
Hi friends, welcome back to the Besos, Jules podcast. It has been a little bit of a minute, unironically. The last episode I spoke about how I needed others in order to be disciplined in things, i.e. having community that requires me to show up and teach yoga and or dance on a, consistent basis. And with this podcast, there's so much passion behind it, but when there's also no one holding, I'll speak personal, me accountable, I'm just not consistent. So I have some really exciting news. I am now signed and going to be working with Jules, who's an incredible producer, but I'll be signed to his and his partner's network called The Plug. And they're a BIPOC-centered, super empowering, just like dope group of individuals that have various different podcasts that encompass everything from sports to sex work to Danny Bay's podcast by the name of Living Vicariously Through Myself. That is an incredible show. I had the great pleasure of sitting with Danny and Julius just a couple weeks ago where we filmed an episode about conscious sex and sexuality. Everything from ethical porn to mindful masturbation and breaking down the various constructs that we have around sex and sexuality. So if that is of interest to you, again, the name is Living Vicariously Through Myself. I would really encourage you and be grateful if you gave that a listen. But let's just jump into it today. I saw a TikTok, and dependent upon the copyright laws that I figure out after I record this, I will either play the audio or I'll just give you a brief little premise. This wonderful creator made a video and they said, the leftist to polyamory pipeline will not get me. Like, maybe polyamory is for y'all, but I just have to say that your marketing team sucks. And I love this video. She went on and gave a bunch of other details that I will get into, but I just thought it was really interesting because with a marketing background and, I do work in social media and I help clients create campaigns. So I understand the importance of marketing and how it can influence things, especially in social causes. So, for example, when we look at defunding the police, that is an incredible movement with hideous marketing. Anyone who has a loved one, a friend, anyone in their general community or vicinity who works with the police or is a police person themselves is not going to jive with defunding them. Why was that movement not called something like refund our communities or like building our communities or like support to success, like literally anything positive except for taking what Americans value most, money, away from something that is deeply rooted, the police, within systemic racism and white supremacy. Just really poor marketing there. But so if we're looking at social causes with marketing, I wanted to talk about polyamory, and here is my theory. I want to preface this episode with saying that I intentionally did not do any research beyond what I already know about polyamory so that I could speak to you from one, a level of authenticity, and two, a level of acknowledging the preconceived notions or stereotypes that exist surrounding and potentially within that community. I'm not within that community, so I can't speak to it, but I think there are some common threads that we will discuss. So let this, be episode 1 of opening a conversation that we will take further. I would love to have some guests on and learn more about this. But here's my theory. I feel that polyamory is directly related to capitalism and greed and the colonialist mindset or attitude towards ownership and valuing numbers and possession and great quantity of things, or in this case, individuals and relationships over quality relationships. And my standpoint is, as a cis-gendered, white-passing female, a Latina female, a, to this day, heterosexual female. That's might change. We're exploring things. But so that's my lens. So given that I'm speaking from the standpoint of living in the U.S. and having primarily experienced society in the United States, though I have very few friends who are actually American. The majority of my friends, and I feel very lucky in this, were international students that ended up staying or were immigrants. And so they have their own unique cultures that I get the pleasure to be around. So I have that privilege. That being said, friendships in the United States are very shallow, if I do say so myself. I've spoken about the challenge surrounding female friendships in previous episodes, and I'm happy to discuss it more. But because women in this country have been bred to see one another as competition, it's increasingly challenging for us to create healthy, intimate bonds. And I want to be clear about the word intimate. When I use the word intimate, I am referring to a depth within vulnerability, authenticity, sharing, the close parts of ourselves with someone, not sex. So that being said, whenever people are unsatisfied with something that is the status quo, there's going to be a radical response. And if we see everything, which I believe is a very helpful view to the world, if we see everything on a spectrum, usually when the status quo is being challenged by a society or a group of people, they propose a radical resolution, knowing that it's the only way to get people's attention, to get some traction with the movement. And I don't know if this is, something discussed within activism, but often knowing that you're going to settle, or everyone is going to settle more on the middle ground than that super radical initial proposal. So, for example, it's like basic negotiating skills. If you're haggling for, let's say a bag of fruit or something at the market, and you're in a place where you can haggle prices, let's say it's marked at 15, you're willing to pay 12 or 13, but you're going to offer 8. And then he's going to go 14. And then you're going to go 9. And he'll go 13 because he's tired of, talking with you now. Now you've got your deal. But you chose middle ground, and you lowballed the merchant initially, knowing that you would find some middle ground. And so I really believe that things are often brought in a radical nature, whether conscious or subconscious, in order to find some middle ground as the ultimate goal. So what does this have to do with radical responses? Platonic intimacy, this idea of really what I see as deep friendships. I'm not sure that we really need to put a label on it, but humans like labels, so if it's helpful to people, wonderful. But I feel like platonic intimacy is a radical response in an effort to develop deeper friendships. Platonic intimacy implies there is a deep, intimate nature of a relationship between people. And again, remembering that intimate does not include sex, and platonic intimacy, by definition, means that there is this deep emotional connection with the absence of sex. So, would this be able to exist? Would polyamory, would platonic intimacy even be able to exist in a world in which our friendships were just free and open? I feel like because of the shallow nature of friendships here, or the competitive nature that inhibits, especially women, from connecting with one another on a deep, intimate level, now we have to give it another label. Let's call it platonic intimacy, just so you can have a proper friendship. I mean, in Europe or in Latin American countries, it's not uncommon to see two female friends holding hands or playing with one another's hair or sitting close or talking with their faces close. Like, this is a natural human thing. But I think we have been so conditioned in the States that, that everything is sexualized, and that's part of the colonialist mindset, is to fetishize it all, that we can't even be close with our female friends without people thinking that we're lesbians. And there's nothing wrong with being lesbians, but I think there's something wrong with the society that can't see close human relationships without putting a sexual label on it. I'm really good friends with my mom, and we spend a lot of time out, and we get very in one another's faces. We talk with our hands a lot, and there's always like some people looking around trying to figure out the nature of our relationship. And then we'll see people whispering or like having looks of disapproval. I think they really think that my mom is like a cougar and I'm like the young girlfriend, or like she's my sugar mama or something. And it's so bizarre, because when we're in any other country, that never happens. In fact, we get, the opposite reaction. We get smiles of like, oh, look, it's cute. Like mom and daughter spending time and laughing and enjoying one another. So I was speaking with a friend, and I didn't exactly get their permission to talk about this, so I'll allow them to remain anonymous. But they enjoy the term solo poly, which, if you're into language, solo being one and poly being many, is a oxymoron right there. But they were very helpful in helping me understand what the heck that means. So a solo poly person will have a romantic relationship with someone that includes sex, but then very deep, intimate, emotional, no sex relationships with various people. And so in my head, when I first heard this term used several months ago, solo poly to me meant just like a lot of friendships, but then one primary sexual relationship that is also involving emotional intimacy and romance. However, after our conversation today, it became clear, I gained understanding that the solo part actually implies that one is responsible first and foremost to themselves, which was completely different. So the solo does not have anything to do at all with their romantic partner, but rather with themselves. And so instead of putting their, judgment or full faith or monopolizing their time to only be with this one person, it's with themselves. And the other romantic partner, or the romantic partner, needs to understand that. And, while I don't love labels for everything, I do believe that language is very important. We would be fooling ourselves to think that certain words or language or terms or way of saying things or tone doesn't affect us emotionally. We can, see it with children in the way that you phrase things. So language is deeply important, and really English, we are at a great advantage in that it is a really dynamic language. We have a lot of nuanced adjectives and way to describe things that other languages simply don't have. And I love learning languages. So this is very interesting to me, but it is a very unique quality to English. That being said, I asked them, well, if you're putting poly by it, but all you're really doing is prioritizing self-care and self-respect and making sure that you have a life outside of your romantic relationship, it sounds like that implies that monogamy, the other end of the spectrum, by definition includes a monopolization of time, an element of ownership, and a prohibition in a way of having other intimate friendships, which to me sounds super backwards. Now, I don't think that's the nature of it. I don't think that's the definition of it, I should say. However, I do believe, because I have experienced it time and time again, that this can be the reality of it. And so when we're thinking about language, if solo poly just means that you have self-respect and a life outside of your romantic relationship, isn't that just a healthy lifestyle? Because within polyamory, there's different tiers. There's swingers, where they're into, two couples come together and they're into swapping or watching, but sex is involved, but there's two separate entities of couples, right? And then there's an open relationship where There can be a couple and maybe one person sleeps with another, but they don't talk about it, or maybe both partners do, but there isn't a ton of conversation around it. In fact, in some relationships, it's like they don't want to know because they feel like it would affect their ability to not be jealous, which is totally reasonable for them, and that works for some people. Then within polyamory, I think the idea is that it's consent to not be cheated on, because if both parties within the relationship are having discussions about the rules that are set, like nothing can be done behind someone's back. So yes, they're out there doing their thing, but there's ground rules and open to conversation. So I think that probably started from a very healthy place. Here's where I have an issue. I believe it would be incredibly challenging for a polyamorous group or collective or handful of relationships to exist without a hierarchy. I think one of the most challenging dynamics within any two-person relationship is the power play and the way that things swing. And, one person's mad and the other kind of has to tuck their tail, or, one person makes a decision that affects the other and now they feel subordinate. So this power play is something that as humans we experience in everything, whether it's with our pets, with our coworkers, whatever. Like hierarchy is very important to us as humans. So I just don't believe that we are honest with ourselves enough for polyamory to exist without hierarchy. Now, if hierarchy is explicitly part of the desire of some people really like the master, sex slave kind of kink and fetish, and that's great for them. But I'm pretty sure there's a big conversation going on around that. I don't believe that in the majority of polyamorous relationships, the desire for hierarchy by the one who wants to be in power is ever explicitly discussed. In fact, we have seen time and time again when it is weaponized, and there are, various abuse type tactics that are used to lure other individuals into this polyamorous relationship that, they realized maybe they didn't sign up for this after some damage and emotional pain has already been done. Now, a friend of mine also described to me that they used platonic intimacy as a way to put up a boundary and protect themselves against someone else. So this offers something really interesting in terms of, let's just have an example. Let's say it's two women, and maybe I'm feeling a little flirtation from this other woman, but I'm not really interested in being sexually intimate with her, but I don't want to use that word intimate. I'm not interested in a relationship of any sexual nature with this woman. I could potentially say, this is platonic intimacy when I'm talking, about our relationship to other people. When I'm talking to her, I could be putting that out there as a boundary to make sure that she understands that I'm not interested in having sex with her. But I don't know. I just don't think it's sufficient. I think, platonic intimacy is just a sad way for us to encompass the desire for the universal desire for human connection. I think we are in peril as a society and as individuals if we can't have deep emotional relationships with people without putting up a boundary of platonic intimacy in order to protect ourselves sexually. So to tie it all back to this initial theory that I wanted to talk about here, I just see polyamory and platonic intimacy as a result of the cultural examples or societal frameworks or blueprints of friendships that we have here in the States, and the limiting nature that they have upon us. And I think this desire for human connection is really what's driving polyamory. But we get lost within this capitalistic, hoarding, greedy-like nature of just having more and more and more, rather than depth. I think if we had, maybe some polyamorous people who had really deep, profound, tender friendships where they could be themselves, where they could be vulnerable, I don't think the need for various lovers would be there. I think not that the two need to be divorced, but I think that having sex with people, multiple people, is often masked for a desire of human connection. And that is not to put any shame on people who have multiple sexual partners. If that is clear in what you want and you enjoy the exploration and the fun and the endorphins, like, that is great. I'm just saying I believe that those are separate entities, and not that one can coexist. But I have heard many men say that the worst thing that happens is after having some transactional sex or having sex with a lot of partners is that they feel really empty and they develop this self-loathing or deep hole in themselves. And it's because they were really looking for emotional intimacy and a place to be themselves and a place for someone to be vulnerable with. And I think we conflate the idea of sex with that. I'm not making any money yet off of these podcasts. I really look forward to it, but it's not happening to this day. So why do I take the time to turn on a mic and write out, notes and get on here and publish things for you all? I'm dying to have these conversations. So if you're listening to this and there are some thoughts in your head that you'd like to share or have a conversation about, please send me a message. Like I mentioned before, I want this to be the first episode of many surrounding our society, our culture, the way that we love and relate to other humans. I think another episode that I would really like to have is to talk about labels and the importance of them for humans. I don't love labels, but I also don't like the anxiety that comes with ambiguity. So whether we're talking about a label of a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, or just lovers, versus a label of someone as gender fluid or non-binary or trans, I think humans get pretty attached to the labels and the words as a way to categorize and make sense of the world. But labels can be incredibly limiting. So with this theory, is polyamory just another label for people to be able to fit in and do something that they've been doing for a long time? I don't know. I think a good podcaster knows when to turn off the mic. So I'll leave you all with that. Thank you for listening. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you again to the Plug Podcast Network for having me. I am overjoyed to be a part of this community now, and I can't wait to see how it will help this podcast expand. Como siempre, besos y abrazos. Like always, big kisses and hugs to you all. And we'll talk soon. Ciao.